Good morning, everybody. My name is Samantha Mirabal. I'm with Melco's application team, and I'm doing a design shop talk today. I don't know why, but it looks like Facebook is not cooperating. It looks like we're live on YouTube, but I don't know what's going on with Facebook. So my little thing here says access expired, so I got to get Melco to help me with that. But good morning. At least we're up on YouTube, so we'll have the link later for anyone on Facebook who needs it. But anyway, my name is Samantha. I actually did not get any questions ahead of time, so I debated just canceling for the day, but figured I wasn't here last time, so if you got any questions, type them in. Last week I was racing, hence my hair is silly still because I thought it was cute. But, well, see, isn't it cute? Anyway. What questions might you have? Type them in the chats. I don't see things sent privately, so if you have a question, type them in the chat, and we'll try to get to it. I do know that, oh, that's fun. How do I add a picture of my fabric while designing applique projects? Okay, so let me see. There's a few ways to do that, right? So let's start with one, and then I can show you more increasingly complex ways, right? So try to think of something to draw. What's something I can draw? Christmas tree? I don't know. A turkey? Let's do a turkey. Turkey. I was just getting a cute turkey off of my place I pay for art. So, yeehaw, there's a turkey. How cute. Okay, so first off, when you're digitizing things, of course, you digitize it in the size you want. So if we want that to be a big old turkey. So how do I add pictures of the fabrics? So first off, what I would do is, digitize what it is you want. So let's say I want to do this leaf. Oh my goodness, this wing feather. I was drawing trees earlier. All right, so right now that's a fill. I don't want that to be a fill, I want that to be an applique. So different things we can do for that would be to select it, hold my shift key, let's hold the control key down, hold this button down while the control is held on the keyboard and convert it to an applique. Okay, so that will make it as a applique design that now you can go modify and play with it and do other things like that. Okay, so as you're working it, you'd work around the whole design, figuring out how you want it to go. Now, showing the fabric, right? So here, you can, if it's done as an applique, I can come in here and tell it to be solid colors. This just colors it in with a vector, right? So that shows like a yellow vector there. If you want that to actually show fabrics, you can come over here and tell it to be a graphic, and then go find the graphic you want it to be. Not that I want that one, but there we go. Let's see what that does. All right, so that put that in there. Okay, so I can make it show different things under this applique tool. All right, so I can tell it to be a graphic. I can tell it to be a crosshatch, and then it makes it like a crosshatch pattern. Over here, you've got options, right? I usually just use solid color and leave it at that. Okay, so that would be one option, is to use the applique tool. Now, if you don't use that, then what? So let's see. Yeah, it's pretty cool. So if we don't use that and we digitize it by hand, so I drew a shape and then I copied and pasted it, turn that into a bean stitch, give it a different color, shift, click, make that a tackle stitch, and I don't like that stitch right there. Let's make it a little different. There we go. All right, so then I got my tackle, which is my tack down, and then I got my top stitching, whatever. All right, so if I do it that way, I have no image shown here. So what can you do? I usually take the first thing and, like the shape, hold the shift key down and just make a vector right there. So vector fill. All right, so when it's a vector fill, again, you can give it colors, right? You can go in and under somewhere, vector, actually, it's only under the applique that you can do it, where you can make it a different fabric, where you can go pick images of your fabric. So here, your only option would be to pick vectors. All right. So I think, Nicole, you said you do everything as vectors, which is great, so you don't have to trace things. So when you have it as a vector, all you got to do is either leave the vector there and give it the color you want, or if you use the applique tool, you can actually, tell it to be pictures of your fabric. Okay, so let's see. Okay, closing some things so I can actually see the questions without having to scroll all the time. Okay, thank you. All right, so let's see. So Nicole, did that help any of how to add pictures? So you can add images to to this itself. It just won't crop it to it. The only way to crop it to that would be to use the applique tool. When purchasing DesignShop, do you have to have both softwares up when purchasing DesignShop? Do you have to have both? I don't even know. I don't know what that means. You can purchase DesignShop by yourself. There are people who use DesignShop and they don't own an embroidery machine, right? They're just digitizing. So, and then there's others who own other equipment but use DesignShop for digitizing. So you don't have to purchase the operating system for the machines and DesignShop, and they don't have to be open. They run independent, right? So from the OS, meaning from the machine operating system, a My OS, MOS, whatever, BOS, if you use Bravos, any of those, you don't have to have DesignShop open. You can go File, Load Design, go navigate to wherever it is on the computer and load it directly to your machine. Okay? All right, so Mike, did that help any? I'll stop that. I didn't want to digitize it. All right. My wife wants me to create a word on the shirt in a large font like athletic letters, turn it into a reverse applique. Do you have a best practice for that? So when you say reverse applique, you mean by putting the fluff underneath it, if you will. So is that what you mean? So that it's kind of raised up? Let me know. Because that's an interesting technique. It's a lot of fun, but what you do for that is you hoop stabilizer, you put your batting or fleece or whatever it is you're going to use down, and then you put the shirt on that, and then you just trace the shape with like a line, and then you cut out the stuff from the back. Okay, where the fabric shows through, that's a little different. Okay, so I was talking about just having like raised letters using fleece or padding, things like that, which is that's a fun technique too. All right, so big letters, fabric showing through. All right, and you want athletic block. In my feed this week, there has been one of the major embroidery design shops, has been posting the same video over and over, and it keeps popping up, and it's a reverse applique. So anyway, all right, so what would I do for this? I've got this lettering. I'm not sewing it because what I want to do is cut this all out. So my first step would be I do Control click, and now I've got lines, right? So with this, it really depends on what look you're going for. Do you want a finished line, right? Or do you want that kind of rough where the material frays and things like that? Do you want a tackle edge? So when you see the fabric through here, do you want to have a zigzag edge on the rest of your material? Those are all stylistic, and it's going to change how you do things, right? So how I would do these personally is I would hoop the shabby. Yeah, okay. So what I would do is I would hoop my stabilizer. I would stick the fabric that you want to show through on it, and then I put Solvay on top of that fabric. I'm really rough with scissors, and I find I tend to struggle when I'm cutting through to fabrics underneath to only cutting one piece of fabric. So I would just, put stabilizer, fabric, Solvay, and then my shirt, hoop all that. Cool. I think I've showed you guys this before, but these things, You notice it's a seam ripper, and notice it's broken. I chipped the tip off. That's intentional. So I use these for cutting out the appliques. All right, so that's just how I like to cut fabric, because when I poke through, once I get the one fabric, now I can take this and drag it around, and there's a razor right there, and it cuts everything nice and easy, and I don't have to think about it. All right, so what did we do? My suggestion would be to hoop that. So you're running stitch like this, and I would probably do this yeah, I'm really abrasive with the scissors. I also have a slight tremor, which is part of it. So I'm not gentle. So the Solvay just helps protect it. All right, so anyway, I would hoop all that, put it in the machine. Now, digitizing wise, it's all there, just sew this, right? You do a bean stitch, fun. I would also do a tackle stitch. And since you want this to be a shabby look, I don't want it right on top of that line. So I would go into these and go change the single line to being off to the back side of it, because you're cutting out the inside of the letter, right? So I would just do this for extra security. So in case you know, snap one of those bean stitches or get too close. But ideally what you do is cut a hole here and then decide on a distance and kind of just cut it, you know, shabby around here, right? So cut all the way around. I would have that tackle stitch just because I'd want to make sure it stays put. And that is how I would run it. Cut it out. Once you unhoop it on the back side, you got to cut all that extra material away, and then you're done. Yeah, and then you can of course pull the Solvay out. But that's how I would do it. So Kyle, does that help? Okay. All right, let me scroll back up. There were other questions. Do I have any tips, density, etc., for digitizing on linen cocktail napkins? So linen cocktail napkins tend to be pretty thin, right? So when you're dealing with thinner materials, you've got to pay attention to your underlays and densities. You don't want so many stitches that it just is so heavy and tight, right? So on those, keeping your densities 4 to 4.2 if you're using regular, oh my gosh, regular 40 weight thread, you know, 4 to 4.2, 4.3 in there, keeping it a little lighter. Underlays, not going super heavy, doing edge walks, center walks. I personally avoid large zigzags on thin materials because they tend to pull, so I stay away from those myself. But again, keeping the underlay not heavy, but you need some underlay, right? So things like that. That's kind of where I would start, is, you know, going with designs that aren't bulletproof, meaning fill upon fill upon fill. We don't like that. But also having the densities a little bit lighter, so it's just not so heavy in there. All right, so Zoe, does that help any? Susan asks, I have the word transportation in micro block font. It'll sew across the seam on a hat. The small lettering falls into the seam of the crack. How do I stop that? Okay, so that comes to dealing with the hat, right? So when things are really small, the hats, they dipped in, and if you have something lining up, it's there. So I have on occasion done, I don't know what to call it, a treatment of the seam. It's, you know, because I've got this area, so I'm just going to draw it with the vector, right? So I've got the hat. Ooh, let's try a vector square. So I've got my hat panel. That's one side of it. There's the other. And yes, they are connected here, but for all intents and purposes, in this area, the hat's dipping down, right? So because it's coming together here, and there's like this gap that letters or small things can fall into it. So I have gone in there before and done zigzags underneath in the color of the shirt or color of the hat. I've done fill stitches, like so, under the entire word. So if I had, for instance, you said micro block, and I assume you're doing it stupid small. All right, and I don't know, maybe that P is kind of more the T. I don't know, something is sinking into it, right? So I have also done primer stitches underneath this. So I've done a primer stitch, not that big. I don't like that. Let's do it again. So let's do a primer stitch, and we really don't need it huge, and we don't need it massive, right? We just need it underneath there to hold it up. So by doing stitches across that seam, right, you can kind of do a treatment of it. And that's why I said I don't know the right word to call it, but you do some stitching there that now your lettering has to sit on top of it, right? So even if all you do is something like that, and I wouldn't do it in that stitch direction, but because the stitch direction of the T goes in that way, so it'd fall in, right? But if I do something like that underneath it in the color of the hat, now my transportation has something to rest on, right? And you can even, you know, do something really light where it matches. So those are the sorts of things that I tend to do. A primer stitch, so there's a question, what is a primer stitch? So the primer stitch is the global underlay. It's, a lot of people use it for beanies and for this coming season, right? For like stocking caps. So if you ever have embroidered on fuzzy blankets on the stocking caps and you just sew a name, what you'll notice is the fur, all the fuzz, it will eat. I mean, it'll bury your words, and you know you embroidered them because you put it in there, but the fur just kind of takes over and starts covering the text, so it's not pretty anymore. So the primer stitch is basically a type of underlay that is sculpted to what you're doing, right? So like in this word here, if I make that a different color. So it's sculpted around, it does a crosshatch pattern. Typically you would match that to the fabric. So if I'm doing this on a white towel or a white cap, I would do that white, and then I would sew this whatever color I'm sewing it. And the point being, it adds the stitches there, holds, in the case of a stocking cap or a stocking, it's gonna hold that fuzz away from it, make a nice flat surface so that when your top stitching goes in, top stitching being your text, it's gonna sew nice and clean. Okay, so that's what a primer stitch is. It's global underlay. There's another term that is trademarked to the company, another company. So that's their term is what most people refer to it. But it's basically a crosshatch of some sort that you put under it. Now the fun thing about them is it doesn't have to just be a crosshatch, right? So you can use the primer and make it a crosshatch, or you can have a lot of fun and change this to a decorative fill and do all kinds of wild designs. So if you actually want to make it, you know, different, I can do patterns, right? So I can do all kinds of patterns. I can create my own. I can, you know, some are better suited for the purpose than others. Yes, it's the same as that. That is the trademarked name, Zoe. So is it the same as a knockdown stitch? Yeah, knockdown stitch is trademarked, but yes, that term. But yeah, it's the same thing. It's just a global underlay, which is a generic term for that. Okay. So yeah, you can have a lot of fun doing that sort of thing. All right. So dealing with the seam, some sort of treatment before you put it down, and it can be small, so it's not very noticeable. So if you just do a zigzag across there and then sew, that might just give it enough to hold up so that you don't have to do a massive set of stitches. How would I go about digitizing a simple line outline like a dog ear line drawing? Yeah, okay. Yeah, you're correct. It's 0.25, it's small, so on this. Yeah, the primer stitch is a convenient way to go. I mean, it lays stitches down and then you go back over it, it bridges the gap usually. The other way is you literally do a small fill or a zigzag stitch across there. Just pay attention to the stitch directions. If the stitch direction is going the same direction, like if I'm literally, like if it's that T and my zigzag is going this way, it's very likely that this is going to still fall down. I would need to have stitches going in a different direction relative to what's sinking to be able to hold it up. which is why the crosshatch is kind of nice. Okay, the dog line ear, line drawing, dog ear. Oh, those things are cute. Okay, I was just looking at what they are. They're adorable. Copy. All right. No, paste. Yeah, so whatever you're going to do, right? I always just look at it and start planning my way through it. And I usually use a combination of either a bean stitch or, I will be honest, my favorite stitch ever right now is this one. It's the thin chain stitch because it's a little thicker than a bean stitch, but it's not quite as thick as a satin. So I can get a lot of, make it look delicate, but a little bolder, right? So it's kind of a cross. Thicker than a bean, thinner than a satin, just right. Anyway, I'm like Goldilocks here. All right, so tips. Look through it. Think about how you're going to break it up to minimize trims. Does minimizing trims really matter? It depends, right? So I like to argue learning to digitize, paying attention to that now, and planning your paths as you're learning is much better because, you know, if I'm only sewing one thing, saving a minute, so what, right? I let it sew for a minute longer. It doesn't really cost me much money, right? To sit there for 1 minute. But if I can save a minute off of 1,000 piece production, that's 1,000 minutes, right? So now we're talking real time and money. So it's always a good practice to start learning well, right? So to learn to think about it now. So looking at this, what would I do? I don't know. So let's start here. All right. Oh, yes, Nicole, I'll show that in a minute. Actually, I'll show that now. All right, so she asked, is there a way to take a vector line and convert it to a satin? All right, so I just drew a vector line. So if I want that, I can hold my shift key down. So shift, click, and now it's a satin stitch. See? So shift, holding shift down and clicking is the exact same thing as clicking on that vector and then going to this button right here, change element type. So if I do change element type, I can tell it to be a bean stitch, I can tell it to be a single line center, and I can say single line center, add, that's the same as shift and click on the single line. If I hold control and click, that's the same as replace. So I can say add, and there it goes. All right. All right, so let's see. If I were to digitize this, how would I start? Well, I try to plan the fewest trims. So all the stuff that's touching, I would try to think about how can I get around this without having a trim, right? So I would probably do this. I would do a running stitch there, or I did the decorative because I love that thing. And then I would probably do a normal stitch out here, just a run stitch to get out here. And then I would copy that, paste that, change it to my decorative, and then I would move my start and stop so it starts here and it stops there. Okay, so what did that just do? That made this look like a continuous line, but it allowed me to end here so I can just continue sewing, right? So now I can go, all right, I want my decorative again, and it's that same thin one. Now we're gonna go from here and we're gonna work our way up. And every time I get to an intersection, I'm gonna think about where do I wanna go from here? So I'm gonna hit enter to stop, and then I'm gonna do the exact same thing. I'm gonna do a running stitch, although I have it set to a decorative, so I'm gonna have to change it. So I'm gonna change this back to a normal, and then I'm gonna do my decorative back. And I can copy and paste it, but I wanted to continue it, so I'm gonna just continue on up here, right? And then I'm gonna do another normal stitch to go work my way out to this corner. It's just a matter of thinking through. This is the puzzle part of digitizing that I personally love. And then that as a decorative, work my way back. And I'm not tracing very gently. Ideally, you would click a little more. precise than this, right? So, I mean, that's how I would do it. I just sit there, work your way around it, thinking about how you're going to path it around, how you're going to get from point A to B. You can always use these things and then use that to help you get closest point. But with these line drawings, it's always going to be pretty straightforward for you just to go, all right, well, I'm here. Let me do a running stitch down to this other corner. And now change that to my decorative because that's how I'm doing this. And now I'm going to run around again. And again, I'm at an intersection here, so I need to be able to go back out. So now I'm going to change this to a normal. Walk down. And then I'm just going to copy that for ease. Copy, paste, change it to a decorative. So that's Control C, Control V, change it to a decorative. Make the start there, the stop there, and now I keep going. All right, and this can be my decorative because I got no more intersections, so there. You know, just keep running around. And then I can update my auto trims, see if I messed up. So far I haven't. There's no trims in there, so that means this is going to sew continuous. And I would just, you know, keep working your way through it. So you can see it just keeps going. And those running stitches all get covered back up. So that's why I'm doing them that way. Okay. All right, so let me scroll back up and see what other questions have I missed. Yep, I did that. Yeah. Is there a way to taper the end of a single line center? Kind of. Yes, there is, but so I got a single line center. Where is it ending? I ended down here. All right. So if I want to taper it, I need to go now add a column to it. So how do you want to taper it? Do you want to round it? Like that? Right, so you just add another element on the end of it. So it continuously sews. So that one, I did not pick my points overly well because it's sticking out a little further and I don't like it. That's okay, I can fix it. That's better. That looks better to me. There. Okay. So yeah, you just, yes, you can add it, but you just add it as a column on the end of it. Okay. Let's see, what other questions? Is there a way to use a vector line to convert to a satin stitch? Yep. I did that one. Yeah, no, Nicole, please type in questions as you get them. Yeah, so the thing with doing these all as one line, it makes a mess. I don't recommend it. These type of line drawings, I just work your way through it. All right, what else? Any tips on selling embroidery files? I make a PNG file designs. I've made some embroidery designs for myself. Think about selling them. Is there a universal format rather than selling 10? I don't know. You're gonna find that people who know about embroidery and know, there are very few machines that I'm aware of that only take one format of file. Yet I will run into users that say I have to use a PES, but I know their machine can also use a DST. So you're going to find that there's two classes of users: the home users who they work with what they've been taught in their shops, and their shops tell them, you are using our designs here, buy them on these dongles. And if you buy them online, well, you can, but you got to find this format. And yeah, I get it. So that's the sorts of things that you've got those. And then you got others who, like me, I don't care what format, I'll buy whatever because my machine uses anything, right? So you'll find you're probably going to have all the formats. So biggest thing I could suggest is on, if you're trying to do those sorts of things, would be to make zip files and have them saved off in a convenient way for people to use, right? Meaning, if you're going to save this design off as how big is it now? So right now it's 2.5 inch, and you have the same design done, formatted for a 3 inch, a 5 inch, 8 inch, whatever it is, and you fixed all those files so you know they're going to sew well in those things. Saving them in a format where the name either has a size in it or in folders, doing some organization to help people is helpful, right? I always personally, I like doing them by size. So rather than by format, rather than saying I've got a DST file, an EXP file, or folder, a PES file, an art file, a Jeff file, and a HUS file, rather than having folders sorted like that, I prefer having a 3 inch file, a 4 inch file, a 5 inch file, whatever, and then I've saved all the formats for that one file under that folder. So what you would end up doing is creating on your C drive. I'm just trying to go. So design, whatever the design is, and then under here, new folder. No, not shortcut. Stop it. Sorry. New folder. 3 inch. New folder. 4 inch. Whatever. So if you're going to do standard designs, what you can do is set up a template of a whole bunch of blank folders, just like I'm doing now. So design, 3, 4 inch, you can have your terms. So let's say you have a new text file, terms and conditions, right? So you can create a template that has nothing in it. Then you would just copy this, paste it, give it the new file name for, instead of calling it design, call it what it is, and then save all your things in there. And the formats are already set up, so you don't have to keep creating it over and over and over again. Mass export, so there is this batch converter, so you can play with that. So output file, you can go tell it. So let's say you have a whole bunch of designs and you want to output it all to EXPs. You go to your folder, say export these 6 designs as EXPs. Now export them all as HUSs. Now export them all as PES, whatever. So you can export all your designs and then just sort them out how you want. Okay, so basically you tell it where the designs are and where you're putting them all. So it saves you a little bit of time anyway. So universal format, DST and EXP are those are by far the most universal out there. But a lot of people don't like them because they do not have color information in them. So they're going to want to have the EXP pluses or the Jeff files, the HUS files, just the files that save color information, the art files, those sorts of things. But yeah, my favorite way would be what I would suggest is create a folder structure that you would want to sell. Put all your terms and conditions, your contact info, any of the marketing stuff you want all in there, so that every time you have a design, you just copy that folder, paste it over into the design area that you're working on. And now when you export it all, you just export it into that folder, and now you have something to zip up to attach to your sales. All right, let's see. When digitizing freestanding lace, is there a satin stitch width you would stay under? Making ornaments, but I don't want them to have satin stitches that are too wide. I don't know, 20 points or less. I would think no bigger than 20. That's 18 is probably good. You could probably do larger, but I think freestanding lace tends to be delicate and pretty, so I tend to keep them 18 to 22, somewhere in there. That's just what I tend to like doing. So something relatively narrow. Is there a way to arc a word where you purchase the font and then insert it letter by letter? Yeah, so, So I've showed this a few times, but let's see. Where is my stuff? Where? Let's see. This is not what I wanted. I'm sorry. things I bought. Fonts. Fonts, hello. A, B, C, D. There. What is one of the fonts that I've already started? Because I always create these and then I keep on having half-started fonts. Custom. Scarlet. Alright, so I'm going to go open the Scarlet font. Where are you? There it is. Got it. All right. So this is just a font I bought. So what you would do with these is, these are, when you buy fonts, they tend to come to you in a gazillion files. Like this one here is 190 letter files in 3 different sizes, whatever. So select the ones you want, drag them over here, and you'll see it puts them into these little tabs. All right. Fun. So now that's a capital L or capital O. It's a 3-inch font. I'm going to go save letter. So select it all, right click, save letter. This is going to be the Scarlet Large, which I already created. If you don't have it created, custom, that's the 3-inch one. All right. So if you don't have it created, create it, right? So you'd do type it there and say new. It now shows that this is the letter O, capital O. So I type that in there and say, okay. And then I go to the next one, select it. This is a lowercase o. So save letter, type in the lowercase o. Over here, that's a weird looking P, but all right, save letter, capital P. Yep, large. And then lowercase p. Save letter, lowercase p. So all I'm doing is saving these. Oh, apparently I already did that letter. Capital N. Select that, right click, save letter, lowercase n. All right, so now that I did that, here's the fun. I can then say, all right, close all tabs. So window, close all, and then I can open the next ones I want to do, put them in there. But here's the fun part. Now that I created that, down under custom, I have that font I've been working on. It reminds me that this is an expanded font. So I did a capital N, O, lowercase p. All right, so a few things. Notice the current, the P is higher than it should be, and that's just where it puts it. But now I can change that by holding the control key, dragging it down to where I want it to be. Now, if I right click, save letter, it overwrites it. So now every time I use that letter, it's going to put it lower, right? So that's for those things that have the lower things, all right? You can go into here and then now tell it to arc, and it will arc it. And I can move these around as I see fit. If I want to rotate that N because it looks a little weird to me, I can click on it, click, and now rotate it. And then I can move it around on the baseline, right? Or I can use my control key and drag it down. So that's how you can add those fonts to the software, and then now you can arc it, do whatever you want, straight, vertical, any of that. Well, let's see. How do I get my tabs to show in DS10? So DS10 doesn't have this. This is new to the software, the new version. So these tabs across the top are the new version. Let's see. Sometimes when I open files and create it in Brilliance, it doesn't keep the trims. If I open the file directly in the machine, it has the trims. What machine? And in here, when you open the file, there is tools option. Where is it? It's a design filter. Tool filter, design filter. So you can tell it to not accumulate or to delete these sorts of things. You might have optimized locks turned on. So, oh good grief, my hearing aid just died. That's really annoying. Okay, so you can turn on, you might have this turned on, so turn that off and it will also do it. Upon opening is when these filters run. Yeah. So when you, in DesignShop, this filter might be, these settings might be turned off, but it only happens upon opening. So if you change those, close a file, reopen it, and see if the it stays how you want it. Okay. Is there a way to type in how much you want to rotate an object? Yeah. All right, so let's do that. Sorry, I should read the rest of the question for those who don't see it. Is there a way to type in how much you want to rotate an object rather than dragging it? Yeah. Oh, I'm still on this font. Let's fix that. I like that. There. All right. So I've got this thing. I want to rotate it. Down here you have a W and an H. If you click on any of those, it brings up a box. It doesn't matter if you click on the W or the H. It's the same box. All right. I can tell it to rotate 45 degrees. And then I can tell it to rotate negative 45 degrees to put it back. I can say, okay, do it negative 20 degrees. I can tell it to do positive 20. So yeah, it's just down here. Any of these, W or H, click there, it brings up this box, you rotate by number. When you rotate it, it does change it to be back to, so if I say 180, yes, it's upside down, but now it says back to 0. So you got to remember what you rotated it if you want to put it back. No problem. Glad that helps. All right, let me scroll back to the top and see if there's any other questions. Yeah, this box is fantastic down here. You can also scale by percent. You know how people say, you know, only scale plus or minus 20%? Yeah. If it's an applique font, will it save it that way? Yeah. So any letter it will save, right? So it'll save it as a letter and it'll just be, you know, 5 color changes per letter. So yeah. Oh, by percent. So I was saying if they, you know, if you have expanded files, they say, hey, only scale that 20%. Well, I can scale it 80%, so that's 20% down, but it goes back to 100. So just telling it to do 120 doesn't put it exactly back. You gotta, but anyway, so there is a little bit of math if you want to be exact, or just hit undo. All right, what other questions do you guys have? So for having no questions sent in ahead of time, I've managed to talk for a while. I like it. I don't know why Facebook isn't working though. So someone at Melco, maybe you can log into Restream and see about that afterwards, so next time. All right, any other questions before I call it a day? Scrolling, making sure I didn't read through something. I did that. Cool. All right, looks like I got all the questions that were typed in so far. All right, everyone. Let's see. Next week, Thursday is Thanksgiving, so I'm gonna be down at my parents'. So I'm not gonna be on. I hope you guys all have a fantastic break if you're taking it. We are getting into crazy season, so hopefully you guys are all prepped for that. I have some issues with Melco OS changing files back to a previous version. Melco doesn't change the files back, so that is confusing to me just in itself. It's just the OS itself just reads it. So it may be filtering stuff out, and that would be that design filter. So the OS has a design filter as well. No, the OS literally doesn't overwrite the files. It doesn't change things back. It just reads them. So the only thing I could think is maybe you made a change and it's filtering it. And that would be under the design filter, so maybe that. There's also a load settings button that if you click that and there were settings buried in the OS, it might overwrite stuff when you do that. So maybe one of those two. But I would need to see. if you, I'd need to see it to be able to help. So what I maybe suggest is if you have that repeatable, call into the help desk and have them watch you do it and see what they see. That would be because they can log into your computer and watch. So if it still does it, but those are the only two I could think of that might be it. The design filter, because that design filter does take stuff. It changes it. And then maybe load settings, but that one makes me scratch my head. I don't think it would do anything. Yeah, I'm happy to help. Hope these are useful for you. We will be back no, I will not be back next Thursday. I'll be back the Thursday after that. Right before I head out of town for a regatta. So is there to save stops while designing appliques rather than having to drop them in the machine? So is there a way to put stops in the applique? Basically program that in. I don't know. Let's see. Tool. There's this thing. Melco OS settings. Project grid. Design. No. So these are the OS settings that you can save that you can then tell it to do. Load settings. And you can load them from here. Melco OS, these guys. Color sequence? Well, maybe try it. So maybe. I don't know. I've never tried it, quite frankly. So under Melco OS, they do have color sequence. So maybe. I don't like stop. I would do applique. So. Okay, so that I just programmed that. That will save it there. So maybe if you go to load this file to OS and then do load settings from file, see if it works. I've not tried it, honestly. So I don't know the answer to that. That's sorry, I do everything fast. Tools, Melco OS settings. Go to Melco OS and then there's this color sequence button. I don't know if that will work. I've never tried it. And I've done this a long time. I've used this though. So I've saved settings here and then load from settings. So I've done that. But I've never tried doing color change settings. So mainly because I keep threading my machines with different colors all over the place and I have 15 of them. So it just doesn't make any sense for me. I'm going to have to do it at the machine anyway. All right. Yeah, I get it. I applique all day long, but I have 15 machines, so we've just gotten used to it. I just memorize it all and click, 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 click. Next machine, click, 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 click. So, all right. Well, have a great weekend. I will see you after Thanksgiving, the Thursday after, and I'll be back. So let us know what you want to learn about, and we will get on that for you. All right. Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining today. And thanks for talking or giving me questions to talk about since I didn't have anything sent in ahead of time. So, talk to you later. Bye, everyone.